love Plopper Style Baits. It's one of the funnest bites that you can ever get on. And today I want to talk about 5 big mistakes that a lot of guys make with that Whopper Plopper, that Berkley Chopo style bait. So stay tuned, it's gonna be a good one. This video is brought to you by Monster Bass. This is a company that will send you a box full of lures every single month to your doorstep. Now the thing that really separates Monster Bass is that they really cater the lures that they send to you to the region that you live in. If you have fished across the country like I have, there are certain pockets of the country, certain regions of the country where certain lures outproduce other lures. They work with guys that are in that area to provide lures that are going to work in your area. Every Monster Bass box not only comes with lures, but it comes with instructions and how-to tips on how to fish those lures in the box. If you want to help support the channel, click that link down below in the description and check out Monster Bass today. When the Whopper Plopper first came out, it was absolutely incredible. You could throw it just about anywhere and catch a ton of big bass. There was a lot of major tournaments that were being won with the Whopper Plopper. And since then, the Whopper Plopper has kind of died a little bit. It's not as easy to go out there and catch fish, but the Whopper Plopper is still a very effective tool at catching bass. Now, when I say Whopper Plopper or Plopper today, what I'm really referring to is these plopping style baits. You know, the original was the river to sea Whopper Plopper. You know, today I've been fishing the Berkley Chopo a lot, but after fishing this bait a lot and also fishing with other guys, you know, co-anglers or friends that have fished this bait, there are a few big mistakes that I see a lot of anglers make that really affect them landing fish or getting bit with the plopper. Now, mistake number 1 when it comes to fishing a Whopper Plopper is not setting your plopper up for success. If you just take a plopper out of the package and start throwing it, there are times where you're going to miss fish that hit that bait and you're going to lose fish that you hook up with that bait. And there are a few things that I do to the bait that I think make a huge difference on hooking up and landing those fish. Now, I don't believe that you have to do a ton of crazy modifications to the Whopper Plopper, but a few things that I do like to do is 1, simply change out the hooks on a bait, and especially if you're fishing the river to sea Whopper Plopper. The hooks that come on a river to sea Whopper Plopper are very thick. It's a very heavy gauge wire hook, and yes, if you can get that hook to penetrate, it will probably hold very well, but I've seen a lot of times that people simply do not get that hook to penetrate past the barb, and they will lose a lot of fish with that hook that comes on a Whopper Plopper. So I highly suggest putting on a higher quality hook. There are a lot of good hooks on the market. I know guys that love Gamakatsu round bends. I know guys that love the Owner round bends. I personally like the Berkley Fusion 19 hook. That hook is extremely sharp and it does not bend out. And I think that those are 2 really key factors into landing a lot more fish. Now, if you're fishing like the 110 or 130 size, typically that takes a number 2 hook. Anything below that, I typically put a number 4 size hook on. Now, the other part of setting your bait up for success actually comes down to fishing the right sized Whopper Plopper. And this is another thing that is so important. I typically like to fish the 110 size plopper. That's kind of the medium size plopper. Now, if I have fish start missing that bait, if they come up there and they just hit it, they knock it, you don't hook up with fish, a lot of times I will downsize that bait and I will actually go to like the 75 series. But I don't always downsize. Sometimes I've actually found that you will hook up with more fish by upsizing the plopper. And this really just comes down to experimentation. If you have fish missing that plopper, try downsizing, try upsizing the bait. That is probably the most critical thing to getting more fish to commit to that bait. Mistake number 2 that I see a lot of guys make with a plopping style bait actually comes down to the rod that they use with the bait. I feel like it's just kind of known that you throw a Whopper Plopper with a flipping rod, a big 7-foot, 6-inch heavy inch rod. I feel like that is just kind of what you hear a lot when you read different articles or listen to guys talk about the Whopper Plopper. Now, the thing is, the plopping style bait is basically like a big crankbait. It's got treble hooks on it. And any time that I'm using a treble hooked lure bait, I really like to have a parabolic bending rod, a rod that basically bends all the way through. It will bend here at the butt as well as the tip. Having that rod that is more of a parabolic bend, it simply helps you to keep fish on that you hook. And I cannot tell you how important that is, especially when you're throwing the plopping style baits. These are typically bigger, heavy baits, and bass can throw them really, really easily. I mean, if they come out of the surface and they're shaking, this bait is flipping and flopping all over the place. And so having that parabolic bending rod, that more moderate action rod, is so critical into actually landing fish. The rod that I have really come to love when it comes to throwing a Whopper Plopper is actually a chatterbait style rod. This is a 7-foot 4-inch medium heavy power moderate action rod. Now this particular rod is the Arc Tharp series rod. It's the B Hitte rod. This rod was designed for a chatterbait. It has a more parabolic bending action, but it also has backbone to it. And that is, in my opinion, a perfect rod for a Whopper Plopper style bait. If that fish is barely hooked, actually take a look at this fish right here. This is exactly why you want a more parabolic bending rod. Barely had that bait. That is exactly why you want to use a softer rod, not a flip stick. So as you can see there, that fish was barely hooked. If I had a very stiff rod, more like a flipping stick, there's a good chance that that fish would have just ripped off. When it went to dive at the boat, it may have just completely ripped off and I would have lost that fish. So to me, this is a critical thing you want to do with that plopping style bait, is make sure you have that right rod, something that has more of a moderate action. Now, mistake number 3 that I see a lot of guys make with this plopping style bait is simply just casting that bait out and reeling it straight back in at a steady pace. Now, that will get you bites. You will catch some fish on a plopping style bait by simply just retrieving it at a steady pace. But something that I think is so important is to add a little bit of action every now and then to your bait. And what I mean by that is my typical cast, I'm gonna cast that bait out and I'm gonna start my retrieve, but every now and then I'm literally just going to twitch my reel handle like that, which just makes that bait spit a little bit of water. It makes it kind of just jolt forward. Another thing that I've learned to do is just completely stop that bait. Every now and then I'm reeling it and I'll just kill the bait, just completely kill it for just a second or two and then start my retrieve again. And doing those two things, kind of popping that bait or just stopping that bait, I'm telling you, there are days that you are out there where that is the only way that you will catch a fish. A lot of times when we're reeling this bait along, there are fish that are tracking the bait. They are just below the bait, they are tracking the bait. And when you twitch it or you pause it, it just causes a reaction strike. They have to go up there, they have to crush it, and you will catch so many more fish by simply switching up that retrieve and not just steady reeling it all the time. That's a real critical tip, something that can help you to get a lot of extra bites on the plopper. Now, the 4th mistake that I see a ton of guys make is being too noisy with the bait. And what I mean by noisy is a lot of guys, if they see a target that they want to fish, for instance, we got kind of the end of a laydown up here. If that's where you think the bass is, do not have that plopping style bait land where you think that fish is, because the plopper is a bigger bait. When it hits the water, it's gonna create a loud noise. So you do not want your bait to land where you think that fish is. That is really something that is really key with every bait that we fish. So if I think that that fish is sitting right there on the end of that laydown, I'm gonna cast past my target and I'm gonna bring that plopper to the target. That is something that is very simple, but some guys just don't always think about that. Now, sometimes no matter what you do with the plopper, you're going to have fish that come up to that bait and they just miss it. You can upsize, you can downsize, you can change your hooks, you can do everything, and they just miss that bait. This actually brings me to mistake number 5 that I see a lot of anglers make, and that is not having a throwback bait ready to go. And what I mean by a throwback bait is a bait that is ready to go, that when that fish misses it, you can actually pick up your other rod. For me, I throw a wacky rig a lot and toss where that fish just blew up. A lot of times that bass is going to stay in that immediate area. If you have that throwback bait laying off the side of your boat and ready to go, you can get that bait to that fish extremely quick, and a lot of times you will catch that fish with your throwback bait. Now, a wacky rig is one that I use a lot. Another really good one is simply just a weightless fluke. Now, if you are a tournament fisherman, this is definitely something that you need to have ready to go anytime you're fishing a topwater bait. And like I said, I like a wacky rig, and I actually made a video all about wacky rigs, and I'm gonna leave that video right here. So if you guys enjoyed this video, I think you will enjoy this one as well. Please comment below, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video.